Well, now that we got our motor plate and battery tray drilled out, we can move on to the next step. Bring it out here to the cart. Lay it on there roughly in place. We got our bridge just laid in place for right now. Got our two holes to line up with our bridge. And we'll set our motor and get it lined up with the sprocket and see where we're at. Well, the first thing we'll do is secure the motor to the motor plate with a nut and a bolt. And then we'll set it in place and line it up with the sprocket. Alrighty, we got our motor plate up to about the front edge of the stock motor mount on the cart. Got the motor and the sprocket gears pretty much lined up. Double check it with standard old paint stir stick. Lay that against your sprocket nice and square, and looks pretty well square to me. Alrighty, we'll set a chain on it and see how it looks. And also on this side we've got our bridge hanging over by an inch or so, depending on what type of mount or strap we attach to it. And then we're going to mark it back here, hang off just a bit. That way if we use a loop type strap, we got a spot to put the two bolts to. It's got our chain just sitting on here. It's a bit on the short side. Yeah, it seems to be lined up pretty nicely. And that gives you an idea of the setup. Now we can mark where to drill for our holes here and on the other side of the motor. We can also mark our bridge here and get our motor plate mounted down after we get some holes drilled. Yeah, I clamped our motor plate down with vice grips before I removed the motor. Make sure it didn't move anywhere. Now we'll use a permanent marker. Can mark exactly where we need the motor mount here drilled. And then also where we would like the mounting holes for our bridge. Alrighty, now that we got our holes marked and everything, set the motor plate aside, and then we'll use a spring-loaded punch to center punch the exact center of our marks. That way we can set our drill bit right on that center punch, and it won't drift around, and it'll drill exactly where we want it to. And just line it up in the center of your spot. Give it a couple little punches and gives you a nice spot to start your drill. And same up in there. And like I said, I always start with one of these little 1/8 inch bits. It's not too small to break easy, but still small to drill a nice pilot hole. They have these real cool little double-ended short bits, so you ain't got a long whole bunch of bits sticking out to make it flimsy as well. So you get it centered in your pre-punch spot. Hit it a couple times. Make sure it's where you want it, and then go ahead and finish drilling your hole. Alrighty, once we got our pilot holes all drilled, those are all 1/8 inch holes, and I usually do it in steps. I'll move up to a 3/16, and then a 1/4 inch, and then our 5/16, because we're working with 5/16 bolts. That way it's a little easier on the bits, it's easier on the drill, and just kind of walks through easier. Now we got our motor plate all drilled out, and we got our bolts just dropped through, but that's where we'll be mounted to the bridge. And these 2 bolts are drilled through the motor plate, so it'll be mounted to there. So the motor will be mounted to these 4. The motor plate will be mounted to these 2. And then the bridge will be mounted to this frame rail and this frame rail. It's usually best not to be drilling holes in your frame rails, because if you have any stress, that's the first place it's going to crack. So to stay away from welding, I'm going to try to use more of these strap loops. Over here is such underneath, 2 of them here and 2 of them up here to secure our bridge.